My name is Fred Gonzalez. I'm an evangelist, and I love to tell the story about what Jesus did in my life. I was recently looking back, and I was astounded that Jesus Christ came into my life 4 decades ago. I can remember the day, I can remember the night, I can remember the situations, but I'm from a small community, it's called Morenci, Arizona, where it's about 5,000 people. I'm a third generation miner, and I, of course, got a job in the smelter, the copper smelter. My grandpa worked underground. My father worked for the mines. My brothers worked for the mines. But it was 1969, I met my wife, and we fell in love. And a year and a half after that, she ends up pregnant. I'm 20 years old, she's 16 years old, and we get married. It's a wonderful thing, but just like the new gets old and the shiny gets dull, we started having problems. I started neglecting, I started getting into drugs. I was not content at all with my job. When I was in college a couple years prior to that, had a dear friend, a very close friend, that committed suicide, and because of that, it just threw me for a tailspin, and it came to the point where I was blaming myself for him committing suicide, and of course it wasn't my fault. But through this all, I brought this into our marriage, and about a year into our marriage, I started doing drugs. Started off with marijuana and on to other drugs, and when my son was born, we would have parties at the house, and it'd be like one party after another. Friends would bring friends that would bring friends in my house, and here we are all getting high. And my son, from the time he's about 1 year old till he was 4 years old, is right in this environment. And, I just didn't care about anything. I just cared about myself. I was neglecting my son, neglecting my wife. And my wife was having a hard time with that. And I remember my brother had gotten saved, and his wife, and tried witnessing to us, and we didn't want anything to do with that. But my wife went over to their house, I remember that, and ends up getting saved, giving her life to Jesus Christ. And even though I did not want anything to do with that, I couldn't deny the change that came over her. There was something totally different. I mean, she even glowed. She wasn't that same person. There was a real miracle transformation. And even though I didn't want to accept Jesus, I knew because of my wife and what I had seen that Jesus was real, that he was doing miracles, because of the fact that, if my wife can change that way, there's got to be a God. So what happens is my wife starts praying and trying to tell me about Jesus Christ, and I don't want anything to do with it. I had a dear friend, still my friend, that we used to do drugs together, my brother, and we tell my friend and me would talk to each other and says, you know what, we're never going to give our lives to Jesus. They can have Jesus. We're just going to stay high. We're going to have a good time. But one day I found out that my friend had gotten invited to, another friend gotten saved, to a baptism in the river. He just went, and he was going to make fun of that friend, but he ends up getting saved, and he ends up getting baptized that day. So here I am all by myself, and I said to myself, you know what, they're not going to get me. They can go ahead and serve God if they want, but I'm not going to give my life to Jesus. So all of a sudden I could feel people praying for me constantly. I'd be in bed at night, and I'd feel somebody just pushing on me, pushing on me, and I'd wake up, and it's my wife, and she's praying for me, in the name of Jesus, come out of him, and praying for me. So what happened was I started feeling like as if I was the center of everybody's attention, spiritually speaking, and they were praying for me. And one day, this friend of mine that had gone saved, that abandoned me, I felt like, he tells me to, after work, to go pick him up. So I do that, and I knew what it was about. I knew he was going to tell me about Jesus Christ, but I really didn't want anything to do with it. But because he's my friend, I didn't want to offend him. So I remember I go and pick him up in my truck. He's got a shovel, he's got a bag. So he tells me to drive out towards the river, and we did. And before we get to the river, he tells me to go down to one of the little washes there. And we're not talking a whole lot. And as soon as we get there, he jumps out, he gets the shovel and starts making a hole there in the sand, and then gets wood and makes a fire. He's not saying anything, and then he gets the bag, and then he reaches in and he gets his pipes. Looking at me, he breaks them, throws them in the fire. Then he gets his bong and he breaks it and throws it in the fire. Gets his marijuana t-shirt, looks at me, throws it in the fire. Then he gets like a 5-finger lid of marijuana and looks at me and throws it in the fire. And I'm thinking, you should have given it to me. Well, you should have given, what a waste. So then afterwards he looks at me. Now he's a new convert. He says, I can't be your friend anymore. And that really hurt me because of the fact that we've known each other since I was 3, and I guess he was 4. We're next door neighbors. We grew up together. We did a lot of things together, and that really offended me. And I says, why can't I be your friend? He says, because I'm saved and you're not. You gotta understand, he's a new convert. He didn't know how to witness. He says, but you know what? Before I could respond, he says, why don't you come to Bible study tonight? Why don't you come to Bible study tonight? Just listen to what he's got to say. And sure enough, I was pressured because I realized that my wife and him had been plotting my salvation. So I end up in that Bible study at my parents' house, and I was mad because I didn't want to be there, but because he's my friend, he invited me, I wasn't going to say no. I ended up going there, and I had determined I'm not going to give my life to Jesus. And I was resisting everything that they were saying. But it's interesting because when they pulled the altar call, I remember thinking and saying, God, you know I love my drugs. I love to get high. If I give my life to you, you're going to have to give me something better. And without realizing it, my hand was in the air as they were pulling the altar call to get saved. I get prayed for. I get led in the sinner's prayer. And that night was the night where Jesus came into my life. This was April 2nd, 1975. And after all this time, I'm here to declare to you that Jesus has always been faithful. He's always been there for us. I remember a burden lifting up the moment that I got saved. I was a terrible husband. I was a terrible father. But the wonderful thing about this all is that God started healing my marriage. He started helping me to be a father to my child. And as I look back, there's a lot of chapters in my life, just like there is in anybody's. But God's always been there. He's always been faithful. He's healed my marriage. He's delivered me from drugs. He restored a relationship that I thought was dead between my wife and myself. I'm here to tell you that Jesus will make a difference in your life. Perhaps you're having marital problems, maybe with drugs, or maybe somebody's been telling you about Jesus Christ. I really want to encourage you. You give your life to Jesus, you will see the difference, because there's always going to be an opportunity.